Well, much of the political class and mainstream media discrediting themselves once again. And indeed, we're seeing a degree of censorship here. When you look at the comments back in 2020 from the likes of London Mayor Sadiq Khan in reference to George Floyd in America, you can see the language that was being used at the time. There's many such examples of other people speaking in this way as well. You can see there, rightly ignited fury. The death of George Floyd has rightly ignited fury. And yet, when Nigel Farage talks of rage after the murder of young Henry Novak, suddenly that seems to be something condemned by some as wrong, and that we should just all be quiet and shut up. Well, look, in terms of what Reform are actually proposing, Equal Treatment Act, ending two-tier policing, banning police race action plans, ending DEI practices, and removing the exemption that allows Sikhs to carry large bladed weapons. But remarkably, when Nigel Farage gave his statement yesterday on the murder of young Henry Novak, many in mainstream media clearly didn't want you to see or hear it.
He was actually treated in a way that meant an accusation of a racial slur was treated more seriously than an act of murder. What does he say? I can't breathe. Familiar words? And yet, what has the public reaction been from our leaders and politicians, and indeed, to be frank, much of the media to this? Silence. Absolute silence.
And I'll run you through what he was saying. He talked about a media silence. Well, I can tell you, because I've got what are called monitors or television sets here, Sky News didn't take it. The BBC didn't take that. ITV didn't take that. Had that been any other party political leader, do you think had Kemi Badenoch, even Sir Ed Davey addressed it, do you think they might have taken it? Suddenly, Professor John Curtis, writing in today's Daily Mail, talking about how Reform are now seen to be putting together a coalition of people who won't change. Well, maybe he's onto something.
Clearly, many in mainstream media didn't want you to see or hear it. Yet, remarkably, even though many in TV news seemed very reluctant to have that on live, you can see what is going on here. You can see still that this speech that they didn't carry live was talked about endlessly. And Zia Yusuf here highlighting what happened in terms of Newsnight, that the BBC inserted the word white with the term there, white, cold, rage.
Nigel Farage has said in response to this, we should respond to this with white, cold rage. Do you agree with him?
No.
We saw riots on the streets of this country. Is there a risk that when Nigel Farage is talking about white, cold rage, is there a risk of that happening again? What is the risk if more people follow Nigel Farage's appeal for white, cold rage?
Now, following on from this, you have seen Nigel Farage saying today, his legal team writing to the BBC demanding a full on-air apology and investigation as to what has gone on here. Now, Matt Chorley, to be fair, has said that he owes Nigel Farage an apology, that he used that term there, white, cold rage. He says it was a mistake on his part. He says it was a misremembering of the quote and that he apologises to Nigel for it. The problem is with the BBC that this seems to be something of a trend. Apology after apology after apology for their conduct, for language used. This is becoming very much a trend now, and it's why the BBC's reputation, the reputation of the left-wing BBC, is in the absolute toilet. Now, whilst mainstream media didn't cover Nigel Farage's speech live, they did, as I say, talk about it extensively. And here is Zia Yusuf on with Cathy Newman of Sky.
We have Nigel Farage making claims that white lives matter, which is a slogan that was used by, the UK's largest white supremacist group. Are you happy with him using that phrase?
Cathy, what Nigel Farage said today was that white lives matter as much as black lives. Do you disagree with that statement?
You seem to be conducting an interview with me, but I'm trying to ask you the question.
I'm asking you whether you disagree with the statement
because
that
you're the
firstly,
politician.
I'm correcting. With respect, Cathy, I'm correcting you on this because to leave out the second half of the sentence, I think is deliberately misrepresentative and misleading. So Nigel said that white lives matter as much as black lives. And my question to you is, do you disagree with that statement?
And my question to you is about Nigel Farage's claims of anti-white prejudice. I mean, there is overwhelming evidence, isn't there, of police racism over the decades against black minority ethnic people. You've got to go back to the Scarman report, the Macpherson report, the Casey review. There are decades of racism by the police against black minority ethnic people. Do you accept that that is a fact?
I'm kind of stunned that you couldn't bring yourself to say that you agree with the statement that white lives matter as much as black lives. I can't understand why you can't just confirm you agree with that statement.
Zia, you're the senior member of a party. You're a politician. My job is to hold you to account, so I'm asking you these questions. And I would love you to answer that question about racism against black and minority ethnic people by the police. There are a lot of people who are angry because they see every day, the stop and search data. They see that. They see the deaths of black people in police custody. And they're saying, where is your anger about that?
Well, again, I don't understand why you can't bring yourself to confirm that you agree with the statement that white lives matter as much as black lives. Clearly, it is unacceptable for anyone to be discriminated against based on immutable characteristics by the police or anybody else. But, Cathy, you've been conducting this interview on a premise that it is wholly inappropriate to watch that body cam footage and be furious. It is wholly inappropriate to conclude from watching that body cam footage that there should be some political ramifications for this. When in 2021, Cathy, you wrote op-ed after op-ed, article after article in newspapers like The Independent about George Floyd. In fact, and let me quote you your own words. You said that you expressed delight that the BLM hashtag transported, and this is a direct quote from you, Cathy, transported the rage of George Floyd's death across the four corners of the globe.
Zia,
so
I've said
the point
to
that we
you,
are making
Zia,
is that
I've said to you,
I
understand
different
people
reaction,
are angry,
a totally different reaction, Cathy, not just from you. I'm only putting that to you because I'm speaking to you now, but I'm afraid this has been endemic across most of the media landscape in this country and the institutions in this country.
I thought that was just quite a remarkable exchange. And, we've got a Prime Minister in Keir Starmer who still denying that we have a two-tier system in this country, even as you can see there, police facing calls to drop race bias policies. And serving officers there speaking to Telegraph, saying that junior officers are fearful of being accused of racism. They default to the safest option when it called to incidents. Now, we did see Nigel Farage in Parliament today asking Keir Starmer about this.
Following the horrendous circumstances of Henry Novak's death, can I urge the Prime Minister to consider this? It is now clear to growing millions in this country that we're living under two-tier policing. The instructions that are given to police officers from police bosses are clear and written down in ink. It says you must treat different ethnic groups in different ways. That, apart from the upset and the anger at the circumstances of his death, the anger that you saw spilling out in Southampton last night, and which is in danger,
condemn the violence,
which is in danger of getting considerably worse, because if the public lose trust,
condemn it.
If the public lose trust in being treated fairly by the police, can he take some action, end this divisive practice of two-tier policing and make sure that all British citizens are treated the same.
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe there's two-tier policing in this country.
And yeah, clearly I think a government basically in denial, and clearly many MPs in Parliament doing their best to try and shout down Nigel Farage. As for his speech, his statement, that, as I said, mainstream media talked about but didn't seem very keen on covering, I'm going to put it at the end of this video because I think it's important, if you haven't seen it, that you do watch it.
Just think of it. An 18-year-old lad, a student, been out with some friends for the evening, on the way home, and victim of a sustained attack. Stabbed several times, chased down the street. Stabbed seriously 5 times. And what happens? Well, the assailant's brother rings the police to say, we've just been racially attacked and abused by a white guy. The sirens blare, they arrive. Young Henry must have thought that at last help was at hand, but far, far from it. The police act from the beginning to the end, and the end when he dies, lying on a pavement, having been stabbed in handcuffs. The last thing he heard on this earth was him being read his rights by the police. He was actually treated in a way that meant an accusation of a racial slur was treated more seriously than an act of murder. What does he say? I can't breathe. Familiar words? Remember career criminal George Floyd, who died in appalling circumstances in Midwest America a few years ago. Remember the reaction to that and the way the police behaved. Within a few days, Keir Starmer was taking the knee. Black Lives Matter exploded all over the country. Churchill's statue was defaced, the cenotaph was vandalised. And yet, what has the public reaction been from our leaders and politicians, and indeed, to be frank, much of the media to this? Silence. Absolute silence. Proof, if ever there was any, that we're living in a two-tier culture in this country where the rights and privileges of white people matter less than those of ethnic minorities. Now, what has happened over the last few decades is, without anybody being asked, without anybody ever voting for it, we've been subjected to mass immigration on a scale that is truly unbelievable. At least 10 million new people have come to Britain in the last 20 years. And let's be clear, many of them are great people who work hard, have integrated and made their lives here. But far too many that have come have refused to integrate, are leading parallel lives and leaving many of our cities almost culturally unrecognisable from what they've always been. But to stop any criticism of this, we brought in hate speech laws. We brought in a DEI agenda. We brought in what is called positive discrimination in favour of ethnic minorities over those of white people whose families have lived in Britain in many cases for centuries. That is the mess that we've got into. And that is why, in some ways, what happened, and despite the appalling behaviour of those police officers, but in some ways, what happened on that night in Southampton perhaps shouldn't be a surprise in two-tier Britain. Alison Pearson, journalist on the Daily Telegraph, received yesterday an email from an experienced, long-serving Hampshire police officer. In it, he makes perfectly clear that the police are told that they must respond to situations in different ways according to the ethnicity of those involved in the crime or potential crime. He also describes how a DEI agenda has gone so far through the police that people now get promoted, not on the basis of merit, not on the basis of ability, but on the basis of what their racial or religious origin is. That has led to a decline in policing standards. But think of this. Much as we may condemn the 2 police officers involved here, think of this. The biggest fear a police officer now has going about his or her duty on the street is the fear of being reported for having acted in a way that was racially biased. That fear, now greater than dealing with a dying man living on the ground. Henry's family have responded to this in just the most extraordinarily dignified way. But I suggest the rest of us respond to this with pure, cold rage. This is wrong. All the values and standards of living in a free country where everybody is judged equally before the law have been trashed and thrown away. And there are one or two things that need to happen very quickly. The first is that the police complaints operation, the IOPC, needs to get to the bottom of this and produce a report very, very quickly. Secondly, even through to sentencing, the sentence given was actually lower than the recommended minimum for a sustained, aggressive, murderous assault. And I'll be writing today to the Attorney General asking him to review the sentence. But the most important thing that needs to change, that has to change, if our society is not to be ripped apart, where communities start to distrust each other and deeply distrust the police and all the other institutions of this country, is we need a change in culture. Enough of anti-white prejudice. A promotion of the idea that white lives matter just as much as black lives. An end to DEI and positive discrimination, but a country that treats everybody equally and fairly before the law. This is serious. This is urgent. I fear for where our society will be in a few short years if we don't grip this and do it very, very quickly. I want to send my sincerest condolences, the country's sincerest condolences to Henry's family. I hope this is the last time a British police force operates in this way. But the fish rots from the head down. It is up to government and police chiefs to change this culture and to start that process today. Thank you.